hopefully everybody here has like a basic understanding of AAC and the basic concepts like core vocabulary, fringe vocabulary, modeling, aided language stimulation, because we're not really going to get into that today. This is going to be more about how do you work with a client who uses AAC in teletherapy, and what are the best digital resources that you can utilize as well. So this is called Show and Tell: How to Provide Awesome Tele AAC Therapy. So does anybody have an AAC client currently on their caseload for presence learning, or were you just, more interested in this topic in case you do have a client who uses AAC? So Erin, you have 3. Okay. One is pending. Dawn does. Someone else said that they have 2. Another has several. Okay. Yeah. So it looks like everybody here has some type of AAC client on their caseload and someone who could use AAC. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Awesome. So this is approved for ASHA CEUs. So I'm going to go over the agenda and financial disclosures before we get into the topics. But I will briefly introduce myself after we go over the agenda. I'll talk about the queuing hierarchy for AAC and different reinforcer assessments that you might find helpful. I will talk about different visual supports that you can use with AAC users and the different simulation softwares that you can get on your computer. I'll talk about descriptive teaching and aided language stimulation, how to use music in your therapy. We'll talk about the 80-20 rule when it comes to core and fringe vocabulary, and then we'll talk about a ton of digital resources that you can use with your clients. There is a handout, Kimberly. It is in the Tassel, where you signed up, like on the website, the Tassel website, where this pod course is listed. If you go down to the bottom, there's like a lesson section where it says materials. And I believe it's where the Zoom link is as well, but the handout is uploaded there. So it's basically the PowerPoint slides with like the notes to the side of that. All right. So my name is Vanita Litvack. If you're not familiar with me, I am very passionate about AAC, assistive technology, and literacy, and have had the opportunity to deliver some poster presentations related to AAC at ASHA. I was also a consultant for PRC Saltillo. So if you're familiar with LAMP, Words for Life, or Touch Chat, I was an AAC consultant for that company. And then I was a school district assistive technology specialist here in Florida for a couple years. And then the pandemic hit and I was expecting, and I just decided to go another route when I returned from maternity leave. So now I'm a teletherapist like you are. And I'm also a consultant for AAC. I do have one private client locally, and I do some AAC consulting online, and then with some of the therapists that I work with as well in my company. I'm a host of the Speechy Side Up podcast, and you might be familiar with some of the Teachers Pay Teachers resources I've made for AAC as well. I'm also, I think I mentioned this, a mom to a 1-year-old daughter. Actually, she'll be 1 year next week on Halloween, which is so wild. And we're at this point now where everybody's having their 1-year birthdays coming up. So we actually just returned from a birthday party this morning. I included a picture of her, of course, because every new mom is very proud of their kiddo. Thank you, Erin. Yeah, she's amazing. All right. And then really quick, I do have some disclosures to share. I have ownership interest in Speechy Side Up and Tassel Learning, and I receive royalties from the Lou Knows What to Do social book series. I'm also a member of ASHA Special Interest Group 12, which is their AAC group. So by the end of this pod course, hopefully you'll be able to describe a queuing hierarchy that you think will help you and your clients to implement AAC in your sessions. We'll talk about different reinforcer assessments, 3 types of visual supports that you can use, how to support language and literacy with AAC, how to use music in therapy, and define the 80-20 rule. So what is therapy supposed to look like with an AAC user? Really, it should look like any other communicator that you work with, ensuring that you're using motivating and age respectful activities to reach their language goals. So the idea is that we are still trying to teach language, expand their vocabulary using the device that is augmentative or alternative to natural speech. Okay. And then, are all AAC users good candidates for telepractice? Before I answer this, do you think that every client out there is a good candidate for telepractice, whether they're AAC or not? Just go ahead and drop it into the chat. No. Kimberly said no. Yeah. Emily said no. Exactly. So it depends on a couple of different things. So Junger had, and I hope I'm saying that right. If someone else knows the proper spell or proper pronunciation, you can totally correct me, but I'm going to say Junker. They found that it really depends more on the support team, resources, and procedures rather than the severity or type of disability. And this is specifically to AAC, but we know this is true of any client that we work with in teletherapy, right? Yeah, Dawn, you said it depends more on the support person assisting. Absolutely, especially when it comes to AAC. But there are clients who use AAC who can actually attend sessions independently as well. It all depends. Actually, earlier last month, we had a presenter for Tassel, and I think a lot of you, if you've joined Tassel, you'll have access to this pod course, but her name was Lydia Dolly, and she is a AAC user, and she completely uses her device independently, and she actually did an interview with me using her device without a support person there. So yeah, it can go both ways. Sometimes they need support personnel there, and sometimes they don't. So Rachel Madel, have any of you heard of her? You probably have if you are in the area of AAC. She's the co-host of the Talking with Tech podcast. Erin says she's the best. Yeah, she is awesome. And she has presented on AAC telepractice in the past. So I wanted to highlight some of the service delivery models that she has presented about. The first is direct. So this is going to look a lot like in-person sessions that you might have with a child. So you're working one-on-one with that client. Consultative is when you're talking with the parents, brainstorming, troubleshooting, and planning targets. Coaching is when you're giving parents specific feedback in real time or after the fact with a video. So, many of you, I mean, everyone here is working in teletherapy. So I don't have to tell you that these are not exclusive to AAC clients. You use these different models with any type of client that you work with, whatever is going to work best. And you can use a combination of them. So the hybrid is a combination of coaching and direct, or consultative and coaching. So you just have to find what works best for your client. So you may have heard of the terms aided language stimulation and modeling. I told you we're not going to dive into the AAC basics very much because we don't have time today. I was hoping everybody coming here had some basic knowledge of AAC, but we want to be top modelers, right, when we are implementing AAC in our sessions. But how do we do that in teletherapy? It can seem very tricky because you don't have access to that client's device. You may not have that same app that they use if they're using an app on your iPad, or you might not have their high-tech AAC system that was funded through insurance. But it is possible, and we're going to talk about different ways to utilize it and to model. It's important that you're simultaneously selecting vocabulary on the AAC system while speaking, and you can use modeling to expand or reiterate a message. Rachel Madel says to inspire and not require. So you're modeling without expectation, and attribute meaning to everything. So let's talk about how this can be done in teletherapy. Are you using Zoom in presence learning, or are you using a different platform? I'll wait and see if someone responds. Okay, so it's proprietary to presence learning. Okay, so I'm not going to dive into how to share a device on Zoom since you're using something that's proprietary. But again, Rachel Madel had shared some awesome resources to mirror screen that might integrate well with your system that you're using for presence learning. So in the handout, you have links to all of these different platforms that you can try to utilize. But essentially, let me show you what screen mirroring might look like. We're using Zoom right now, but if you use any of these other apps, you should be able to do something similar. So I'm going to swap this so that we're mirroring from my iPad. Okay, so if these allow for screen mirroring and you're using an iPad, most likely it's going to be the same function, which is to swipe down from the right-hand side of your screen and then select screen mirroring. And then usually you have to be on the same Wi-Fi network and have your Bluetooth on, and then you can do that. So this is the Lamp Words for Life app that I'm screen mirroring right now. And you can hear it as well, which is nice. So let me go back to the PowerPoint because I have some other things that I want to share about screen sharing and what is important to keep in mind when you're doing so. Okay. So this does say screen sharing on Zoom, but I think a lot of this still can apply to any screen mirroring program that you use. But one thing that you want to do is if you don't have access to that AAC system, if you don't have the app on your iPad or you don't have the same high-tech device, then you want to have the parents share their device on their end so that you can see what their vocabulary looks like. And then you'll use annotation features. So like if you have a highlight feature or and if you don't have it built into Presence Learning, I believe there are some plugins that you can find where you can use like annotation on your computer. So you would use the annotation features to show them which buttons are to activate or which words to say or which words to model. So Dawn said, I have Apple TV and will screen mirror my iPad with that to the extra TV monitor, or I just use a second camera to show the iPad and then make my PL screen jumbo. Awesome. Yeah, we're actually going to talk about using like a second camera on a system. So the way you described it, that's an excellent way to kind of work around if you're not able to directly mirror it to the platform. Thanks for sharing that. So yeah, and I think the last thing is just making sure everybody has their screen sharing permissions on for all of the participants. Okay, so Dawn, you just shared a way that you kind of have a workaround, and I believe you were referring to like the webcam views. So Hall and colleagues, they wrote an awesome book. Oh my gosh, I didn't even bring it out. Let me grab it really quick. I hope I have it up here still. I do. So has anybody seen this book or read this book yet? It's called Tele AAC and it's written by Hall and colleagues, and it's amazing. It's extremely helpful. So Erin said no, but if you're looking for more ways to implement Tele AAC, then I highly recommend it. It's great. But in that book, they talk about the different Tele AAC intervention setups. So the first is text-based. So this is like text messaging. So this is going to be for someone with good literacy skills. On the other hand, webcam views requires 2 different webcams for the client and 2 for the clinician. And I'm going to actually show you an example of that, but I believe that's what Dawn was describing. So she has her camera on her face, and then she has a second camera on the device, or maybe even like a light tech board that matches the child's AAC system if you don't have access to the app or the AAC system. I got the copy. Yeah, I got it off of Amazon. Of course, like for whatever reason, I think that these books from the different publishing companies, they're kind of considered textbooks and they're very expensive. So if you can get it secondhand, I highly recommend it. The other Tele AAC intervention setup is simulation software. So this is where you're going to have a version of the AAC system on your computer. And I'm going to talk about different ways that you can get simulation software. So for instance, LAMP, PRC, the creators of LAMP, they created a simulation software called PASS, and you can download it to a Microsoft computer. Mostly all of the other AAC systems, they have some type of simulation software as well. And then the last is internet connectivity. So if you have a client with a high-tech AAC system, maybe they use eye gaze or head pointing, they have the ability to unlock the device and connect it to Wi-Fi, and they can log on to Zoom or the platform that you use with Presence Learning on their device, and then they can have their AAC vocabulary on the other side if they split the screen. It's important to know that if they went through insurance to get their device, that the device is going to be locked because of insurance, but most companies only charge like $50 to unlock it and get access to Wi-Fi. So those are the different types of Tele AAC intervention setups. And one thing that I should note is the simulation software is not going to be a good option for light tech AAC. And then the webcam views is better for like mid tech, low, and you can use it with high tech as well. So here are some like visuals, because I'm like a visual person. Whenever you give me an example, I'm like, let me see how it is in action. So what Dawn was describing, Dawn, does this kind of look like what you were doing? I think you had explained that you share it with your television and kind of go that way. But this is another way that you can do it. So you could have a camera from your phone on the AAC system and then see she's logged into Zoom from her computer. Okay, and Dawn said, yeah, it's kind of similar to that. Okay, perfect. And then simulation software. So Sarah Gregory is another amazing presenter in the field of AAC, and she has an awesome YouTube channel where she shares a lot about AAC telepractice. And one of her videos, she's using simulation software. So this is LAMP Words for Life on the PASS software on a Microsoft computer. And on the other side, she has her activity, which looks like YouTube, and they're using the PASS software to model and engage with the activity. Any questions about these different types of AAC intervention setups? What do you think is going to work best for your clients? Just kind of looking at these. I know Dawn's already using webcam views. But I'd be curious to know what other setups people are interested in. So I'll just share that I have not used the text-based setup yet, but internet connectivity, I've done that one, and simulation software. I don't know that I've had the opportunity to do the webcam views because we just didn't need to. We were able to AirPlay from my iPad, but I think that's a really great option as well. Yeah, so someone said that webcam seems like that would be useful. And yes, in that example, she was using a phone camera to log in to the platform that they're doing the recording on, and then she had it facing the AAC system. So she just had like a setup that was kind of over the device so that she could model on it. And then Kristen actually uses the simulation software. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about how to get simulation software if you don't have it already. Boardmaker Online is very popular, and it's going to be really useful for any of your clients who use a Tobii Dynavox because it's the same symbols. It has PCS symbols, and it can be used on any platform. So iPad, Microsoft computer, an Apple computer, whereas some of these can only be used on Microsoft. So I kind of wanted to note when it can be used on any platforms because I think that's helpful. And they do have a 60-day trial. The lesson picks is more affordable, but the symbols are different than most of the popular AAC systems. So that's just something to keep in mind, because if you already have a client who has an AAC system, you're probably it's going to be beneficial to have a simulation software that has the same vocabulary and uses the same symbols. Cough Drop has a free 2-month trial, and it's translatable, which is pretty cool. So if you have someone who's bilingual, it's nice to know that you can get it in different languages, and it can be used on any platform. I've talked a lot about the past software from PRC. Just keep in mind that it can only be used on a Microsoft computer, and the voice actually disappears after a period of time. Same thing with the Saltillo devices, but I believe if you plug in the Saltillo device to the computer while using Chat Editor, the voice will still remain. Like, it won't disappear after a period of time. MyToby Dynavox is free, and it can be used on the iPad or Microsoft computer. And again, it's good for Tobii Dynavox devices. And then Visual Engines, has anybody used this, or is anybody familiar with this? Maybe I'll bring it up so that you can see what it looks like. Okay. So Visual Engine, I think, is like my best kept secret. I've been using this since I was like a clinical fellow, and a lot of times when I show this to people, they've never seen it before. So it's just an easy way to make visual supports pretty quickly. You could do this in Microsoft Word, or you could do it in any of these simulation softwares. But if you don't have access to them, and you want to use like real pictures, or you already have the symbols on your computer, then you can use these templates. They also have like I want boards and personal stories and choice boards. And it's free. So it's useful to check out. And then Smarty Symbols is kind of like Lesson Picks. It's also affordable, but it uses different symbols than the popular AAC systems. Is there any other simulation software that someone is using that wasn't mentioned here, or have you used any of these simulation softwares? I know that Kristen is using a simulation software. Which one are you using? If you don't mind sharing. I see Kimberly had wrote, webcam views looks to be the best for students that I see. I've not tried this before, so there will be a learning curve. Yeah. Okay, so you have a student who uses the Go Talk Now, and you have the app. That's great. Cough drops for one of your students, and you love it. That's awesome. And Kristen uses touch chat and lamp. Perfect. Thank you for sharing. So it's nice that you work together, and it looks like you have a variety of different AAC systems. I don't know how much collaboration time you get, but it's nice that if you get someone on your caseload who uses touch chat or Proloquo or Go Talk, then you can kind of, bounce ideas off of each other. All right, so let's talk about different AAC treatment strategies to use in teletherapy. So, whether it's someone who uses AAC or it's a child that you're seeing for articulation or phonology, you want to make therapy motivating, right? And I love this quote from Chris Bouguet. He said, SLP should be the wackiest person in the school. And in this case, it should be the wackiest person on the screen, right? And he gives an excellent example. He said that when kids come home from school and their parents ask them, how was your day? What do they usually say? Good. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. Did anything happen? No. And, and that's probably because nothing really exciting did happen. School is, for most part, it's very predictable. Everything happens the same from day to day. But what if the child had a field trip that day, or a petting zoo came to the school? They're probably going to share about it. So kids learn best when they're exposed to new things, to novel stimuli, to novel experiences. So that's why he makes the statement about being the wackiest person in the school, because that's the best way that children learn. And I wanted to include some reinforcer assessments here, specifically geared towards individuals who use AAC. I found these off of the Practical AAC blog, so you'll have links to these in the handout. Has anybody used a reinforcer assessment? If you haven't used it just with your AAC clients, have you used it with any of your other clients yet? So where I work, in our intake form, we actually have a section that asks, like, what are the child's interests? It's not a comprehensive reinforcer assessment, but it kind of gives a good idea of what, they're interested in. Dawn said, yeah, great. Perfect. Yeah. And, sometimes it can be a little bit more challenging if the client has significant gross motor impairments. Or they don't have a reliable communication system and the family hasn't really determined what they're interested in. But it is possible. Yeah. And so Kristen has used a questionnaire with parents. Awesome. Okay. So it's important to use a least to most prompting hierarchy when you're working with clients who use AAC. I love the one that the AAC coach shared here on the right-hand side, but the one on the left is pretty popular, has been shared quite a bit in the AAC community. So I wanted to include it as well. And it's a little bit more detailed, so you have more explanation here. But, I think therapy in general, it gets pretty intuitive after a while. Like, what type of cue a client needs. When you're just starting out, you might be, okay, wait, I have to do wait time first. Now what's the next type of cue? But it's similar to other clients that you work with as well. It's not that different for your AAC clients. The only thing that is really important to note is that there needs to be an extended period of modeling and aided language stimulation before you can use a least to most prompting hierarchy. So if you've never modeled the word go on a child's device, then we can't expect them to automatically know how to say it on their device, right? Unless maybe they have good literacy skills and they can read the device and find the word go. But for the most part, you have to provide a good amount of aided language stimulation. And then we're going to go from least to most. So we're going to wait about 15 to 30 seconds using an expectant pause. Then we'll go to a indirect verbal, gesture or direct verbal, and then finally model if needed. Has anybody seen either one of these cueing hierarchies before or used them? Not yet. Okay. Also, the AAC coach, if you're not familiar with her, she is amazing and shares awesome resources. So I highly recommend following her if you're not already on social media. And then the left one you've probably seen. Yeah, it's been shared quite a bit. All right. So we're going to talk about two different types of teaching when it comes to instruction, whether it's with an AAC client or just academic instruction. But I want you to think about descriptive teaching. So this is when you're using core words to teach low frequency words. So is anybody, I should have asked this in the beginning. I did preface this that I hoped, everyone was coming in here with some AAC knowledge. Is anyone not familiar with core vocabulary? Because I could quickly go over it if anybody is not familiar, but it seems like you all have AAC clients, so you probably have some knowledge of core vocabulary. It's been a hot topic for the past couple of years. So it looks like nobody has, any questions about it. So I'll go ahead and talk about descriptive teaching then. So descriptive teaching is when you're using core words to teach low frequency French words, whereas referential teaching is the opposite and it's used more often in academic settings. So let's see what that looks like. When I first presented this presentation, it was close to Shark Week back in the summer. Big fan. And I was like, let's do this on sharks. So a referential style question would be, what is the biggest shark? And you'd probably have like multiple choice questions like whale shark, great white shark, nurse shark, and then the child would have to select the correct one. Same thing for the second question here. What is the largest predatory fish? What this requires is a lot of programming, either on your part or the family's part. They have to program in whale shark, great white shark, nurse shark, or whatever those fringe words are that they need to answer the question. But instead, if you use descriptive style teaching, you could reframe the question so that the answer is included in it and it's more open-ended. So like, as opposed to the referential style, the opposite would be, what can you tell me about a whale shark? And they could use core words like big, nice, not many, slow. And these are all words that should be included in their AAC system already if they have access to a robust vocabulary. Let's try another example. So I already said, what do you know about a great white shark? How about, what do you know about a nurse shark? Go ahead and put in the chat some core words that you could use to describe a nurse shark. So I'll tell you one thing about descriptive teaching. It is not easy in the beginning. It requires very flexible, creative thinking, a little bit abstract. So when I was trying to think of some core word examples for whale shark, I was like, but as you go along, or if you're looking at an actual core board, nurse shark, nurse shark. I'll write it. Okay, smaller, no problem. Gray, fast, yes, awesome. Are nurse sharks fast? I didn't know that. I'm like terrified of any sharks in the water, so I just like watching it on Shark Week. But yeah, so those are some good core word examples. Let me, I'm gonna pull up my core board in the back, or actually I'll share it on the screen again so that everybody can see, and we can kind of look at some of the other words that we could probably use. Okay. All right. So hopefully everybody can see these words here. So just looking at this front page, if we're talking about a nurse shark, someone said small and then gray and fast is on this one. Yeah, I believe, okay, slow is here, fast. Are they good? Are nurse sharks good, you know, compared to a great white or I think that's subjective, right? Like I would probably say that any shark is bad. But they're not harm, you know, I don't think they do harm. So some people might say that they're good. Emily said do. In what way? Your nephew would tell you that sharks are all good. I love that. Yeah, so there's, and they're not big, right? So, I mean, for the most part, I don't think they're very big. So we could say not big as well. But you can see there's a lot of different ways to use core vocabulary to talk about whatever subject it is. Live water, like what do they do? Swim. Oh, I love that. Like you turned it into a question. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my iPad now, but those were excellent examples. Thank you for sharing those. So yeah, it's a little bit harder, but it has the most payoff because otherwise you're going to be programming tons and tons of French vocabulary into the system. So let's just compare the two really quick. Referential style, it requires a lot of new words to be added to the system. It requires less critical thinking and more rote memory for words that the child probably isn't going to use very often. Like how often are they going to be talking about great white sharks or nurse sharks or whale sharks, right? Maybe not very often, unless they're Aaron's nephew, who is probably going to talk about them a lot. Emily said this is a great way to prompt. She was adding fringe vocab all the time the last few years. Yeah, I mean, I did the same thing when I started out. I was creating a lot of academic or a lot of like topic-based boards. So if we were doing Play-Doh, I was like putting all of the colors on it. I was putting like tons of fringe words for any activity that I was doing. And those are important to add. So we're going to talk about the 80-20 rule in a little bit. But you can see the value of having access to more core vocabulary. And like if the kid, like all kids change their mind, right? So you might go into a lesson planning to talk about sharks and they might be totally over sharks this week and their new like love is dinosaurs. So the good thing is if you have access to core vocabulary, you can take those core words and talk about dinosaurs now. So that's really the value of doing descriptive teaching versus referential. And then descriptive is using words that are already in the AAC system. And this requires more creative thinking regarding the concepts and vocabulary. Like we really had to think about it, right? Like we're like, well, I don't know, what are nurse sharks like? But that shows you that the client understands a lot more about the topic you're discussing than them just naming it from a multiple choice selection. Okay. Any other questions about referential versus descriptive teaching? I'll keep going. And if I see something pop into the chat, I'll address it. So literacy is my jam when it comes to AAC. Like I love talking about literacy in AAC. And I think it is so important for any client that we work with, no matter what the disability is. And I love this quote from Karen Erickson and David Copenhaver. They said, "We don't think the intelligence issue matters when it comes to literacy. All children can learn to read and write, can become people who matter to people around them, and can use reading and writing in ways that improves their lives." So I'm going to share the 5 components of literacy that should be targeted when working with clients who use AAC. And then if you're looking for more information about AAC and literacy, definitely check out these Project Core professional development modules. They're free. I think you can get a certificate from them as well. And they cover all of these topics in more detail. I'm just going to take a sip of water. So robust literacy instruction includes these 5 areas: shared reading, shared writing, alphabet and phonological awareness, independent writing with access to a full alphabet, and self-directed reading. So I'm going to share some resources that you can use for each one of these areas. So there's a lot of links here. If you want to take a deeper look at any of these resources now while we're on here live, I can certainly open them up. And if I find any that I think like, oh, you need to see this like right now, I'm going to show it to you. But we have a lot of content to go through for the rest of the presentation. So you do have these links included in the handout. But the first area of literacy that you would target, it's not sequential, so you can target all of these at once. But the first one I'm going to talk about is shared reading. And there's a couple of different strategies that you can use for shared reading. There's the CAR strategy. There is the RAP, which is RAAP. And oh, great. Erin shared that she uses Tar Heel. Awesome. Yeah. You know what? I think I'll show you Tar Heel Reader because I think it's an awesome resource. And it's really great for shared reading. So let me open this up to show you. So Erin has used Tar Heel Reader. Has anybody else used it? Erin, have you used it to write or read books? Or both? To read them. Awesome. Yeah. And they're so great to utilize, especially for like core vocabulary. So let's say you're working on the word go, you could type that in and you should get, books that align with that word. For whatever reason, it's not working with these words right now. Or yeah, the ones that I put in. Let me try one. It doesn't seem like it's changing whenever I type that in, but I think that these, maybe they like categorize them by all the core words. So those are just popping up at the beginning. But if you scroll down a little bit, you can see some of the other options. Now there's like a lot of content on here, but I think you can go in and select like different settings that'll narrow down your options. But you can use it to write books as well, which can be a fun activity. And so it looks like a lot of you have actually used it. That's awesome. I'm glad that like it's being utilized because it's a great free resource. Another area of shared reading that you can utilize is repetitive books. So there's a link here to a list of repetitive books. I also have a list of repetitive books that I used in therapy, and I mentioned the core words that are in those repetitive books. So that's a freebie that you guys will get access to at the end of this presentation today. So you'll see that on like one of the last slides. And then the next area is shared writing. So predictable chart writing is a very helpful way to target this area. And it has 5 steps. So let me open this up. So I know most of you are probably seeing your clients. Are you seeing your clients daily, or is it more like 1 to 2 times a week? So in my telepractice, it's like 1 to 2 times a week. It seems like it's the same for presence learning. Yeah. Okay. So, with predictable chart writing, they have it like by days because a lot of the times it's being used in a classroom, but you can do this over sessions too. So like maybe your first session, you would write out a chart. So let's say your target word is like. You would have multiple sentences with the prompt I like. And if you want, it could be eat, but you would have it multiple times. And then the client would go on their AAC system and select different things that they like. So they might like candy, they might like dinosaurs, they might like sharks, and you would write down what they say on their AAC system for things that they like. And then maybe the next session, you reread the sentences together. So here you're working on writing, here you're working on reading. And then on this, maybe your third session, you would kind of cut up the sentences and have them rearrange them to make the original sentence. So I'm actually giving you guys my free emergent literacy resource that's on TPT. I think it's my highest rated resource, and it was actually like my biggest passion project. So I hope that you'll find it useful. But within that, it's basically using the predictable chart writing format. And there is one area in there that allows you to rearrange sentences. So, and it's digital. You don't have to go and, reinvent the wheel. And then maybe your fourth session is when you're acting out the sentence. So this is a little bit trickier to do on, distance learning or telepractice. So you might skip to this one, but this is where you make a book. And we're going to talk about some fun ways to make books, but Tar Heel Reader is a great way to do it. You could do it on PowerPoint. You could do it on Tar Heel Reader, on Google Slides, and you would take the sentences that you originally created with your client and add images or Giphies to it and just make it fun and meaningful to them. And children love to read. Children love to look at the art they've made, and they love to look at things that they've created. All right. So that's predictable chart writing. There's some other resources here that are listed. The next area is alphabet and phonological awareness. So this resource right here is a wonderful free resource that was created for all of the letters of the alphabet, and it's up on Google Slides. So let me open up this first one. That way you can see it. But if you're targeting the letter A in your session, for instance, they have all of these different slides to introduce the letter A and words that start with it. All right. And then the second or the fourth component of literacy is independent writing and access to a full alphabet. So alternative pencils is a way to access or to write if the child doesn't have, the ability to use a pen or pencil. They can also write on their device using the keyboard. And then finally, self-directed reading. So here are some ways that children can read. It doesn't have to be a traditional book. It can be audio books. It can be comic books, Nat Geo Kids, and Tar Heel Reader as well. All right, so let's talk about different core word resources. I see that Kimberly wrote Nat Geo Kids is great. It is, it's awesome. So core word resources, these are my favorites. There might be some more out there, but these are the ones that I've used and have been really effective. The first is the Assistive Work Core Word Classroom. So I know somebody had a client who uses Proloquo. Are you using the Assistive Core Word Classroom? If not, you definitely want to check it out. It's free. And they have these lesson plans for each core word of the week or each core word. And it's really awesome. Aaron said, I copy a lot of their stuff. I know, it's so great. And then the core word workshop was developed by the Cough Drop people. And it's kind of like the core word classroom. It's awesome as well. So they also have like videos, books, examples, activities for each of the core words. And then the AAC language lab. So if you have a client who uses a PRC or Saltillo device, they should get a free subscription to the AAC language lab. But if you want your own, it's not that expensive and it's a yearly subscription and it is very useful. Word list, like the dynamic learning maps or Benagi's list, which is here on the right-hand side. So these are the most frequently used words by toddlers arranged by frequency. And now that I can't believe I'm about to say I have almost a toddler. She is definitely like using some of these like that. She's starting to point to things. And I don't know that she's actually saying that, but it sounds like that. And we're obviously modeling it for her. But I think it's just so interesting that, that young, they are already using core words. The Practical AAC blog is amazing and very popular. You've probably heard of it. Project Core, so those modules on the literacy, or AAC and literacy, Project Core has those modules and other great resources. Obviously, Teachers Pay Teachers is excellent. The Wings Works YouTube channel, so they have YouTube videos for different core words, and Cooking with Core. So if you have a client who likes to cook, this might be a fun way to incorporate some movement and activity. If the family doesn't mind doing it on their end, you could have like some fun with food activities. Maybe you would send what they would need, like what materials they would need before your session, and then you guys could implement it during your session. Any other like core word resources that you've used that are not included here that you want to share with everybody? Or has anybody used these? I know someone said that they used the Assistive Work Core Word Classroom. What about some of these other resources? Project Core. Wonderful. All right. So how do you plan a Tele AAC session, or working with a client who uses AAC in general? One of the first things that you want to do is you want to identify their language stage and their location on the continuum of communication independence. So I'm just going to share the language stages with you. These were actually they're based off of Brown's grammatical morphemes, which we probably you probably learned about in grad school and maybe have used a handful of times in the field, but they're based off of Brown's grammatical morphemes and they're applied to AAC use. So at stage 1, this is where the client is talking with one word at a time on their AAC system, and they learn to direct activities, request, and label. So I'm just gonna go to stage 1. They might understand a lot of vocabulary, but on their device, they have less than 85 words that they use. And they have some nice language objectives listed here for you that you could, put into your goals. So identify where your client is in the language stages and the continuum, which I'm going to give an example, or I'm going to show you the different areas of the continuum next. But I just wanted to give an example. So if your client is an emergent stage 1 communicator, they might benefit from a core word of the week or day approach, depending on how fast they acquire the words. It might be helpful, since you're seeing your clients usually 1 to 2 times a week, to do like a core word of the week or multiple core words of that week approach, depending on your client. And you can plan your session around that word and use existing core word of the week resources or create your own. So here's the continuum of communication independence. At the emergent level, the primary goal is to teach symbolic communication. So just modeling where the words are on their AAC system. But this is where they really don't have much experience with their AAC device or any AAC in general. The context dependent is where they're using their device to express language. They have some experience with AAC, but they need to expand their communicative context and partners. And then the context independent is where the goal is to explore the user's desires for communication. So they're really successful at communicating with both familiar and unfamiliar communication partners using their device. They can use words to create novel utterances. So they're, using sentences at this point. And then the last goal of the continuum of communication independence is to have good literacy skills. So this is where you're helping them to be a more efficient communicator and really say whatever they want to say, whenever they want to say it. If they don't have access to it on their device, they can at least type it out using, letters. All right. So once you found out where they are in the language stages and on the continuum of communication independence, and you've decided how you want to approach therapy, whether it's a core word of the week or multiple core words of the week, you can create lesson plans for that if you need to. And someone had mentioned that they were, incorporating a lot of fringe vocabulary in the past. And that's why I wanted to talk about this rule. So it's the 80-20 rule. And what we know from research is that 80% of what we say comes from core vocabulary and 20% of what we say comes from fringe vocabulary. So when we're doing lessons, we want to have that same balance. So let's say you're going to target 5 words. 4 of those words should be four of those words should be core vocabulary, and 1 of them could be a fringe word. If you're going to have 10, then 8 of those would be core vocabulary, 2 of them would be fringe words. And here's an example as well. But there's an editable template if you'd like to use it. And there's a link to it here. Just make a copy of it, because I've shared this with multiple people. So make a copy before you go ahead and edit it. But it gives you a place to put the core words. If you're doing shared reading and writing, like the predictable chart writing, what's the sentence that's going to target that core word? What books go along with that core word? And remember, I'm sharing a book list with you that has different core words next to the books. Are you going to incorporate music and song? Which one are you going to incorporate? And then what is their preferred activity? And how are you going to carry over this word in their home environment? All right, so let's jump to the fun part, ideas for Tele AAC sessions. So music is a great way to incorporate movement and help kids to, get up, get physical, and learn that way. So Tar Heel gameplay was also created by the same people who developed Tar Heel Reader, and it uses YouTube videos. So you can take any YouTube video, put it into Tar Heel gameplay, and then have it pause at specific sections, and a core word or any word pops up and prompts them to say the word on their AAC system. Some of my other favorites are the speech and language songs, or songs for littles for our younger children. And then for older children and teens, you want it to be age respectful, but also, incorporate their interests. So if they are interested in something that's younger, that's okay. But typically like pop, oldies, rock and roll would be really fun to do. I had volunteered at an AAC camp and we did karaoke. So we stopped the song at we stopped the song at like the hook, and the kids had to read the words from the song. You can give them prompts if they need it, but it's a really fun way to incorporate their AAC device. Another activity that you can do is shared photos and videos. So both the family and the clinician can upload photos and videos to talk about what's happened in between sessions. And you can make it password protected so that it's safe. You could share session videos, family pictures, pictures of preferred toys. And it's a great way to spark conversation. And here are some different tools that you can use. Another way to target AAC in therapy is through augmented reality. And I presented on like this maybe 2 or 3 years ago and created this resource to the right, which you'll have access to, but it has different apps that you can download. I believe all of these are free. Yeah, they are. And it tells you ways that you can use those apps and the different core words that you can use to, use those apps. But what augmented reality is an enhanced version of the real physical world. It allows you to target different communicative functions and a variety of core words. And you're going to have the AAC user tell you what to do with the program, because if the app is on their device, it makes it really difficult for you to see what they're doing, to talk about what they're doing, especially on the other side of the screen, maybe unless they're screen sharing their device with you. But what I would recommend is you have it on your device, you screen share from your device, and then have them tell you what to do with the app. All right, GIFs. Rachel Madel is big on these, and I love them as well. I actually like using them to create our books for our shared writing activity. So you can use descriptive language like core words to comment on the GIFs, and it provides context to literacy-based activities. Here's an example. So if you were making a book that had the core word see in it, and the child had mentioned a bunch of things that they see in the environment, you can go and find GIFs to illustrate that. Mini movies are another favorite. They're short videos without words, so very open-ended. And a lot of them are really silly. So it's a great way to target a variety of communicative functions. And you can pause at different sections in the video and use a least to most prompting hierarchy to encourage communication, assuming that you've already provided modeling and aided language stimulation for a while. Boom cards. Is everybody here still using boom cards? I feel like it's dwindled quite a bit, but for people that do teletherapy, I think it's still pretty popular. Hannah Speech Banana, she has a lot of free activities for different core words. And this one is an interactive core vocabulary board. Let me just show it to you because I think it's amazing. So maybe if you're just starting out with someone, you're not sure if they're a good candidate for AAC or not, or you're not really sure, everyone is a good candidate for AAC, but you're not sure which AAC system is going to work best for them. You could maybe try this out if you don't have access to something yet. But it has sound for each of these. There we go. It's a little bit delayed, but it's still a great free resource. Okay. I know we are coming to the 4 o'clock mark, or the hour mark. I'm almost done. So I'm going to kind of run through these really quick. But another resource is using PowerPoint or Google Slides. So here's a free template that you're going to have access to. And it has a core board on one side, and it has a visual scene on the other side. And then it has like little pictures on the bottom that you can take and drag and put over the visual scene, and you can use the core board to talk about it. This is helpful if you don't want to split screens, because if you have like your video here and you have your core board here and you have an activity here, it can make it like really tricky to navigate all of that. So this is all on one slide. And what you can do is make a copy of this and just swap out this core board for one that matches your child's AAC system or your client's AAC system. You can change this visual scene depending on what season it is. So you have access to that. That's free. Here's some other Tele AAC resources. I reference this book a lot, but here are some other resources that you can click on and check out. And then I told you that you're going to get some freebies at the end of the pod course. So if you go to these links, you have access to my free goods library if you're not already a part of it, but it has that book list in there. It has the augmented reality list, and app guide, and the free emergent literacy resource. So it will take 1 to 2 days for approval if you decide that you want access to the literacy resource. Just because it is also on TPT, I want to just make sure that it's getting into your hands. And here's the references from today. Here's how to earn AAC CEUs. So you'll just go to that page on the Tassel website, and you have the quiz there, the feedback survey, and the handout is there. I'm going to include a transcription, a playback recording. So in case you miss something and you want to go back, then you'll have access to that. All right. Do you have any questions? We did good. We wrapped it up pretty quick. I hope I didn't run to the end too quickly. But you do have that handout, so you can check out all of those resources, at your leisure as well. But thank you everybody for coming today. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Kristen. And this was, I really enjoyed doing this Saturday pod course. So really quick, if you guys don't mind, do you prefer a weekend course or do you prefer a week course? I'd be curious to know. Weekend. Okay. Yeah. Weekday. So it kind of goes back and forth, but it looks like a lot of weekends. Really great to know that. I appreciate your feedback so much. Thank you for your participation. It made it so much more interactive. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and yeah, have a great night. Thank you again.